Welcome to Privacycast Season 3. In today's podcast series, we bring the best privacy minds to you from India, right? Nowadays, we're talking about DPDPA, and that's why we brought none other than Arya Tripathi with us, right? She's a partner at PSA, and she also is a Mondac Thought Leader Awardee for India. She's a CIPPA certified professional, comes with a lot of data protection experience. Truly honored to have you here. Arya, would you like to quickly give an introduction about yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Akash. I think it's a pleasure to actually talk about this seminal law that India has witnessed. And even before the law came, just quick fun facts that there did exist a set of rules which were quite far-reaching, often sidelined. And I think I have been working in the privacy space for so long, mostly in a cross-border context. So I'm happy to answer your very interesting questions, which should benefit the listeners around. Thank you.
By the way, guys, Arya is also a IAPP Delhi co-chair, and I am a Bangalore co-chair. So we keep catching up, discussing thought leadership, right? And we doing events. So by the way, we did a lot of events together as well, and that's where we actually met online. Okay, so our listeners, are now in anxiety, right? Because there is so much of chaos outside in the market, right? Honestly, every other article that I read, right, I am not getting anything out of it. Every other article somehow, I don't know, right? Every day there is a document that comes online, and I read some, but I've stopped reading now because there's a lot of fag, right? So I kind of call thought leaders who actually know stuff to kind of tell actually mein hota kya hai, right? To the point, what are the actual things that are going to happen, that are going to change. So like a global data analytics company, right? Now they're doing business here in India, right? And they're doing global business, right? So for them, they have direct interactions also, but indirect interactions also, because they have back offices in India, right? Like if you look at any big company in the world, their major work is getting done in India. So what these DPDPA, compliances or regulation frameworks, what do they have to do today? Yeah.
Uh, Akash, I hear your question loud and clear, and I will divide it into parts. Let me just put you and everybody who is listening at ease to the fact that uh, DPDP Act is new as a law, but a very old-aged principle that has been expanded upon. Okay. Uh, Believe me when I say this, today many of my existing clients have just woken up and come to me and said, please tell me what I have to do. That's not the approach. I will sincerely request everyone to use this very valuable time to understand what the law is. Implementation is a very different aspect, and DPDP Act has not been implemented yet. It has become made it to the legislation book, the official gazette, but there would be a separate commencement notification. And it is quite possible that this itself is going to take in time. I was having this conversation with a younger lawyer who wants to work with us. And my question to the person was, which section in the act do you think should be notified as implemented in the very first instance? And the answer to that is the Data Protection Board of India. Even before businesses start getting worried, what is important to understand that this law contemplates setting up a new regulator, an independent regulator called the Data Protection Board of India. What is the role of the regulator? The regulator is responsible for implementation of that. So there are going to be staggered approach towards implementation, and there is time. I will not say there is a lot of time, but it is not a fire emergency. This is the right time to invest in two processes. One is advocacy and sensitization, and the second is evaluating the available technology options that can be quickly selected. So what I have typically seen whenever there are discussions around engaging a PED or a DSAR software tool. So my only 2 cents here, basis the years of experience, is that having a law and its implementation are two different things. And what is this time meant for? Is a good prep time to see where we stand and understand the law and evaluate some of the aspects, key being the cost that is required to actually comply with the act as it stands today. Now, coming to your illustrative case, I think we'll take a step back. The DPDP Act actually applies to Indian foreign companies alike. It is not dependent whether you are registered or incorporated in India. So there are two aspects. If the processing is happening within India, you're very much. It doesn't matter if you are a global analytics company who has a GIC here or a data center out here. If you're processing in India, as simple as even having just a data server or a storage, you are covered. Now, the extraterritorial application is where somebody is processing outside India, but with the intent of providing goods or services, okay, to somebody who is in India. Now, a global data analytics company that is present in India and is processing India is covered. Even if you were not present in India, like having a permanent establishment or a branch office in India or a project office in India, and you were to actually make sure that your data is getting processed. So if you're a controller or a fiduciary outside India, but say availing SaaS services in India, it is possible that you're covered. Interestingly,
data पे when processing होगी, तो लगेगा law, right? That's
so correct. The first wing is irrespective, whether you're Indian or not Indian, whether you are in India or not in India. If you're processing in India, you are covered. There is one interesting exemption under section.
If let's say data of a US company comes back to India, it gets processed in India, right? So then what is the case? Do you think then our law will apply or a US state law will apply because the citizen data that is here is for the US? Yeah.
First and foremost, whether US law will apply or not will depend on the US law. Okay, so we will not comment on that. But whether Indian law will apply, the answer is a straightforward yes. If you are processing data that has come to India and is being processed in India, rest assured, whether it is the data of a US citizen, data of a US company, doesn't matter. You are processing digital personal data in India and you are covered within the first direct territorial agnostic method of application.
This is a huge difference from a GDPR.
Yes.
Right? Because this is because if somebody is in Europe, and usually this doesn't happen, right? Usually most of the companies are in US. So a lot of times this question never got raised. But a lot of companies are in India. So if this is going to be a problem, right, in terms of applicability, I think, this is something I feel, can create, can ruffle some feathers while doing processing, because this is serious trouble for all the companies. Because if some data is coming back to, see, I get the point that if somebody is in US, right, their data is coming back to India, and there is a, let's say, California Act, CCPA. So I'm with you, right? It makes a lot of sense that CCPA applies, right, when we are processing in India. But then again, if Indian law applies, I think that is a double application for all of us, and we should be really careful about it.
I think what we did at the time of formulation of the law, what happened were there were different permutation combinations. Say, for example, GDPR has a concept of main establishment. What is a main establishment and whether that is in EU, okay? But even there, the first leg doesn't say that only a European company has to comply with GDPR. There also it states that if you are processing data within EU, you need to comply, right? That leaves the ambit open and in a very simplified way to determine who all are covered. What I think has happened, and which is a very right thing to do, is that what is the law trying to regulate? The law is actually trying to regulate processing of personal data. Now, if the processing is happening in India and this law were not applicable because you are a foreign company or because you are actually processing data of somebody who is outside of India, then what are you? You are letting go of a lot of data that is being processed completely unregulated. Look at it from a perspective of also whether this is going to benefit adequacy decisions for India in favor of India. I think having a larger scope of application of law itself takes us closer to the adequacy matrix. Of course, there are gray areas which we will not talk about right now. There's an important exception that is there, section 17, which has a list of exemptions, which says that if pursuant to a contract, an Indian processor is actually processing data of a foreign data fiduciary of people who are outside of India, this act may not apply, right? But that is an exception. So the thumb rule as it stands today is that if you are processing within the territory of India, irrespective whether you are a fiduciary or processor in India, or whether the data belongs to a data principal within India, you are supposed to expect that the DPDP Act is going to apply to you.
So what is also happening right now is, most of the data, I won't say most of the data, that would be wrong, but a lot of data in India is being processed by the e-commerce platform, right? The boom of internet in India. I think the free Wi-Fi that, Jio gave, thank you, Ambani, by the way. So the free Wi-Fi that we all got, right? It changed our world, right? Even in villages, people are using uh, amazing applications like Flipkart, Jio and whatnot, right? Amazon. So what is going to change for them because of DPDPA from consent requirement perspective, right? Because now, and also as you mentioned, right, a consent requirement is not new because IT Act was already there. A right to privacy and Putta Swami judgment was already there, right? These things are not new, but governance was not there. And the problem was we did not have a data protection authority. So over to you, like how do you see consent mechanism? How do you relate it in terms of governance, which may happen down the lines? How do you relate the governance and consent management that is going to change for e-commerce?
Sure. Very pertinent question, Akash, and it's just not for e-commerce companies. Unless and until you think you fit into the certain legitimate use criteria of processing, which I believe is an exception matrix of processing and not the norm. The norm is consent. So unlike a GDPR or a CCPA, or for that matter, PDPA, DPDP Act actually establishes that as of date for India, consent of a certain kind is going to be the sole and primary basis of processing. A lot needs to change in how this consent is obtained, how this consent is managed, how this consent is allowed to be withdrawn, and what are the rights that flow out of a consent matrix. And if I have to segregate into these four buckets, okay, how consent is obtained, how it is managed, how it is allowed to be withdrawn, and what are the rights. I think a lot of organizations and most likely all the e-commerce platforms would have to do a 360-degree overhaul. Why I say this? I have seen in my professional experience to have like some very disturbing manners of obtaining consent, which I know I would be very unpopular when this gets released, but I call them creep-in functionalities, okay, which actually means that the consent is not free. So the first requirement is that it has to be free. And for free consent, what is needed? Please, we will have to go back to understanding how a contract is ever entered into. Everything is established in a crystal clear fashion. You cannot have verbosity. You can't have all catch-all languages. You cannot have non-data mapped consent requirements. You need to call out that I'm taking X data for Y purpose. It is as specific as it gets. And gone are the days when a default setting, an opt-out consent mechanism was in fashion or still is in fashion. This needs to change. It needs to move into an opt-in fashion because now it has to be through an affirmative action. How do you take an affirmative action? A swipe, making sure that you take specific consents on different aspects with different tick boxes. That is how you will obtain consent. So I think we need to understand that implementation in India will be slightly or massively different from implementation in other jurisdictions. A closer analysis would be in Asian countries versus doing a European country analysis. And that I'm saying, Akash, is basis the cultural underpinning. At the end of the day, what is privacy? Privacy is a part of a person's right? It's a fundamental right. It has to be exercised by a person. So if you ask me, will consent be actually implemented? That's the intent. But the implementation will bring in a lot of cultural issues. Basic question to a lot of people who would be attending this session. Do you suffer consent fatigue? Have you ever felt that you have not read what is there in the consent form and still ticked? Now, if that is the conditioning that has happened over years, even if I give you a specific consent, the chances are you will still suffer from consent.
Also, moving on, right? Moving on from consent, right? Moving on towards breach fines, right? Because fines are something that everybody's talking about, right? And this is something that is also a great motivator. So if you look at GDPR, governance also happens, by the fines. the governance happens by people complaining, and then the third governance that happens is by the DPO himself,
Correct.
right, who's inside the organization. So now in India, the requirement for DPO is SDF, for SDF, significant data fiduciaries, and also independence is not mentioned. So a lot of people are also asking me whether a CISO or general counsel can become DPO. I feel it's the answer is yes, should not be done. I feel the answer is yes. What's your take on that? And how do you see the fines incoming after this law? Fines incoming. Two things, right? Two questions.
Yeah, I'll take the first question, the second question first, which is on DPOs. Okay, this is a very age-old debate and perhaps needs a consorted approach. Whether a general counsel or a director or a CEO can act as DPO as per the construct of the DPDP Act, nothing stops it. If you're resident in India and if you're accountable to the board, so clearly you are right that there is no mandate for an independence of the DPO because they treat DPO as the representative of the organization rather than the gatekeeper for privacy governance within the organization. Okay, so it's a diluted standard for DPO. So really, I mean, a general counsel or a director or a CEO can pretty much act as a DPO. Okay, and coming to fines, I go back to where we started, and it almost feels like this is a full circle. Okay, fine. There is no mincing of words. The steep fines are only done with an objective of deterrence. Okay, the fact that you will not comply with it till a fine has been imposed is kind of not just true for India, it is seen everywhere across the globe. If you want to bring in a new system of law, you will come up with these sort of fines because the first big penalty that will get levied will be the actual awakening moment for other organizations. So the idea is to create deterrence. The process still remains a little evasive, but what I can tell is that
adding on to your point, I think when I started my career, I started in as an auditor.
yeah.
So we had this, two terminologies. Right? I'm just adding on to your point and getting some, masala to this. So there are two points, right? It's called TOD and TOE, right? So TOD means test of design and TOE means test of implementation, right? So now, interestingly, the TOD, which is the fix of policy, so every other discussion that I'm having right now, whenever I go on a call, the client always says, "Hey, boss, my privacy policy, I have done everything fine. So I am okay, I'm good, okay. There is nothing that I have to do now." So I find it, see, again, they need to do this today. There's no doubt about it. I'm not laughing on that approach, but end of day, the implementation has to come, and that automation of responding to a DSR, right, is something that is going to make it havoc for companies which have customer data, right, B2C. That's the beauty I'm waiting for.
Yeah. No, I mean, like you said, DSARs, or for that matter, pets. These are concepts that perhaps Indian businesses will still find novelty. Okay. Let's just call it that way. What is this? What is a DSAR? Even questions can get asked. I'm not saying that we are not sophisticated people.
I hope they don't treat it like an RTI, right? Like DSR.
No. But the point is very simple that what is being proposed cannot be done only through human resources. You and I are on the same page, I'm assuming. If you think that there will be one DPO who is going to be able to let you navigate through this, no, you will have to speak to tech people. You will have to speak to designers. You will have to speak to cybersecurity officials. You will have to speak to a horde of people like you and also to me. But the point is that this is a collective exercise. I think I would like to end on this note. There is need for change of how you look at this law. If you look at this law as compliance, your approach will always be that the tick box approach. If you look at this as a governance-centric law, you would realize that this law is actually a very principle-focused law, susceptible to sets of facts. So your systems and processes have to be adaptable, cost-efficient, and at the same time, resilient. So quite a concerted effort is needed. And I think DPBI setup, the first task for the Data Protection Board of India would be to spread the right kind of awareness.
But privacy is a human right, and the human right has to be given. So please don't think that if you have a framework, that if you have a framework or some company gave a framework to you, that's not what it is about. It's about a human being whose data you're processing, and he will ask for his right. So treat it differently this time, right? So just an advice to all the cybersecurity professionals and everybody who's jumping on, who's looking for a framework on WhatsApp group, right? So I wish you all the luck. I will also give you a framework from Saro, by the way, right? So but don't use it right. And Arya, also thank you for educating all of us. I have one quick bonus question for my listeners, right? So a lot of times, these college graduates are also listening to us, and people who want to jump into privacy, they are listening to us. How can they become privacy professionals, and how can they become good privacy professionals, right? Do you have any tip for them, right? If you can,
Yeah.
please.
My first and only tip is that next time when you are signing up onto an app, going and visiting a website, please start reading the terms of use and privacy policy. And if you feel that there is a surge of blood, then you are a natural at this. You will be a perfect fit. Uh, don't start ticking everywhere without reading what you're signing up for free. This reminds me of a quote: nothing is free on internet. Your data is the price that you pay to be accessing internet, and use it wisely.
That's also a problem. So thank you, Arya, and thank you for joining in. And it's a pleasure speaking to you. And I feel like you actually know a lot. And I feel we should do a series of this, right, where you can actually, tell people on how to do this. See, we are implementers, right? So, and we are implementing, but coming these things from you as to building our frameworks always helps all of us down the line in our even in our consulting services, in our training services. So thank you for joining in, and I wish you all the luck and all the best. Do you want to say anything to our listeners before we close this?
I think this is interesting time, not just for businesses, but everyone. I think we should be celebrating the fact that now we have a law, and with caution, we should start actually looking forward to a more informed society. Akash, you're doing fantastic work. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to voice my thoughts. I'm sure that we will have some blocks, but we will always surpass them.
Yeah, so we've already surpassed them, and here we are. And I wish you all the luck and all the best. And guys, if you want to follow Arya or reach out to her, her LinkedIn would be in the comments or in the description, and even mine. So, and I will see you in the next podcast. I'll get something more interesting for you next time. So, subscribe to us, right? And have a nice day, guys.
Bye bye.